right, hello everybody, and welcome to another episode of Spotlight on CS Ops. I'm Matthew Lind, and over there, my co-host Jean. Hello, Jean.
Hey Matthew, how are you?
I'm all right. Great to see you. And our special guest today is Spencer Engel. I'm so pleased. We are so pleased to have him here. He is a longtime customer success platform expert. Did some time at Gainsight, where I think that's where we met, Spencer, when you were working at Gainsight. You led several tracks, and then you made your way over to UKG. I think as a Gainsight architect there. So we're so glad you're here.
Glad to be here. Yeah, I've known you too. I mean, how can you be in the space and not hear of both of you? So yeah, I feel like I've known you both for a few years now, and this is an awesome opportunity. Thanks for having me on.
Well, it's absolutely great to have you on. And I know I've definitely leveraged your help a few times over the years. You're always the guy that, the go-to forever. Anyone had a really complex problem, Spencer was your guy. So
yeah, right. I mean, Spencer says, "Oh, you could be in the space and not know us." And I think, well, there might be a person who, so you can't be in the space and have had a big problem and not know Spencer.
That's the reason why he knows us, because we knock on his door.
We had problems. Spencer helped us out.
Love doing it.
Awesome. Spencer, do you want to get started and maybe tell us a little bit more about your journey and how you got into being a Gainsight architect and driving CSPs?
Yeah, I love this space because it's so relatively new, right? Like, customer success is an industry it's a little disputed, but you could say it's really only been around maybe 10 years, maybe a little bit longer. I mean, in theory, it's been around longer than that, but like the focus on it, and especially with CS Ops, even more like of a brief timeline. So because of that, I graduated from college. I'm probably going to age myself here, but back in 2010, and there's no such thing as like a CS Ops track back then. So when I started at Gainsight, and I'll get into the journey, but I am, just one of many kind of diverse background type of people. Like, I was a journalism major at the University of Missouri. Some other, Scott Drost, that you guys both know, was a poetry major. And we had some people at Gainsight that were African studies majors, and across the board, history, all sorts of stuff. So it's really cool to kind of see all these different backgrounds like end up in this industry. So I give that background just to say that, I'm no different. Like I said, I was a journalism major. As you might expect, was not that easy finding a job coming out of college because of that industry, even though it was, a good program and everything at Mizzou. But I fell into like kind of more of an account management role at a small company in St. Louis. And from there, transitioned into like an account manager at a video production company a few years out of college. And through those two roles, met some people that actually defected to Gainsight, including like Kendra McClanahan and some other like big names, Scott Drost being one of them. And I ended up being like the last one of 5 or 6 people that kind of made that jump, because for those who don't know, Gainsight was founded in St. Louis. So I was extremely fortunate to get my foot in the door around like early 2016. Had no idea what I was doing, just to be fully transparent. And so hopefully that gives some like some hope to people that are like kind of trying to break into this industry. So I got into Gainsight and was hired in as like a project coordinator, and then kind of worked my way up and just quickly realized that the best way I could make the best of my time there was to learn the product as much as I could. So I just, I've always been a pretty quick learner, but didn't really have any SaaS experience or a whole lot of technical experience, really. I mean, I was like an, above average person with like IT and computers, but, I had to learn a lot of stuff, like how to join data and do all this stuff. And just gradually over time, and just through doing the work and doing the job, worked my way up to like, one of our lead kind of technical engagement managers on our services team, parlayed that into moving into like a customer success architect role, where I really enjoyed like kind of getting to deal with more like diverse challenges rather than just strictly onboarding customers, and from there turn that into a Gainsight architect role here at UKG. So that's a lot of talking, but that's kind of the journey.
I love it. You're amongst friends here in the liberal arts. I studied Greek and Roman like classical studies and Greek and Roman history. Minored in philosophy, minor in anthropology, and then went and did my MBA. But yeah, and I think Matthew, you had a similar liberal arts background as well.
I was at a liberal. This is a theme. Several folks who we've talked to have said something like along these lines, like that generalist background or journalism back, whatever it is, you bring that into CS, customer success, and it just works somehow.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I wonder too sometimes if, with so many backgrounds, if that's part of why customer success and customer success operations is thriving as an industry, because we are almost by nature diverse. And we didn't train to be chemists, and therefore we all, went through the chemistry program at Mizzou or wherever. And therefore we ended up with these vast backgrounds that then glom together into this customer success space.
I think there's something to that. Yeah. And just being able to relate to other customers, because a lot of the customers we deal with, you'll see that with customer success leaders and CSMs and other people, like just fellow operations people, they all kind of have that type of thing. So like I feel like when you have that in common, even though you're not, it's not like a chemist talking to a chemist, but it's like one person that kind of just happened to end up in that industry with another person that happened to end up in that industry, and you have those kind of conversations all the time. I don't know. I feel like there's something to that, Matthew, like that you kind of have that shared experience of just coming from all these different places and coalescing in, that one industry together.
Yeah, it's part of what I love. Go ahead, John. Go ahead.
I was going to say, like, super interesting, because I truly believe liberal arts sets you up for like a customer success background. Like if you're wanting to be customer facing and dealing with like people's problems, or challenges, like, having that ability to, be a little bit eloquent or to be able to speak and be able to have some EQ and stuff like that, I think equips you really well for that. I think what's interesting is, like, and the three of us maybe share all this, is like through that experience, we realized, hey, we're actually really good at like understanding systems and figuring out like, how to put these building blocks in place so that we can help CS teams like really scale up and grow and do the things we do. So I think it's great to have you on the show and great to kind of hear that experience. I wonder, like, as you've had a lot of opportunity to learn on the job as a person on the platform side. You're helping multiple clients through many different challenges and things like that. So you definitely would have had that opportunity where you just learn on the job. But was there anything that you guys did at Gainsight that helped you like learn the application? Like, did you have to go do the training like all of us and just learn, become certified and learn the ropes one piece at a time?
It's a good question. So I feel like with anybody's career journey, like you kind of have to, there's always luck with it, right? And like kind of who as well. So like, obviously I already mentioned like the who thing. I was incredibly fortunate to have Kendra and Scott and a couple other people that I knew from that previous company. And then just the moment in time that I got there, just I can't explain, I can't like recreate that. I was just incredibly lucky to come at a time when Gainsight was just starting to kind of like take off in its like startup journey, I guess. So I was employee number like right around 300 or so, and they were just starting to get serious about like operationalizing really like a bunch of different departments, but especially services. So like they weren't even tracking time until like right after I got there, and like talking about billable utilization, like that was just nothing. It was not a thing they did until like right when I got there. So like along with that and getting serious about, training the people who are onboarding. So we actually did like kind of I think it was weekly boot camp for a lot of months, like when I was there. And it was like, in addition to your job, I think it was like every Thursday we would block off 2 or 3 hours and get in a conference room, and we all kind of go through different exercises. and like learn different things together, like learn how to join data and have like practice orgs that we work in. And like, that's something that would just like never really happen now. It's like, at least at a company of that size, you know, like if you're hired into services, you're expected to be billable, like 80% billable or whatever, pretty much within a month or two, probably most of the time. So like, and I think we were, you know, about 55, 60%, and eventually ramped up to 80%. But, you know, they were investing that time in us, and I'm very grateful for it, because like that definitely helped a lot, as well as just, you know, taking your lumps with learning how to you know, different customer issues. Like there's no replacing that, but definitely having like those boot camps is super helpful, and that set me up for success big time. A couple other, yeah, I can speak for others that went through that as well, that they would say the same thing.
Very cool.
It's really interesting. I haven't heard that before. I feel like I'm learning some Gainsight history here.
Yeah.
And also, I'm giving you credit for Gainsight adopting its billable model, because it sounds like it started as you arrived. So,
Yeah.
congratulations. I know, Spencer, your particular work. Just given that I know a little bit about you, you have undertaken some highly technical exercises, right? So the boot camp that you discussed probably prepared you well for what was to come, which you've handled corporate acquisitions, if you will, on the CS ops side. So tell us a little bit about that, and how you even prepared for moments like that.
Yeah. So that's a big reason why I was hired at UKG. So, I mean, they liked my, you know, kind of technical chops and just Gainsight admin experience, but really there wasn't a whole lot of preparing for it. It was, you know, there's not a blueprint, and Gainsight didn't have a blueprint either. Like their services team was kind of learning on the fly with us, and I don't blame them for that, because we had, you know, legacy Kronos Salesforce instance and a legacy Ultimate, and, you know, the two had merged about a year and a half before I had joined, and it just partly because of the pandemic, but just other reasons as well. It was, you know, kind of tough to merge all these different systems together, and like they being UKG was starting to get pretty serious about you know, doing that, but it was, you know, like targeted for late 2022, ended up being like May 2023 to merge Salesforce and Gainsight. Watch going crazy. So, but merging Salesforce, Gainsight, and a few other systems as well, but Salesforce and Gainsight being the main ones. And that was, you know, to Jean's point about just kind of understanding systems, like there's just not a lot of training you can do, and you kind of have to just lean on your experience and like just kind of trust yourself to be able to kind of lay out the steps that happen. We had some help for sure. Like I don't want to take full credit for this. I mean, we had an IT project manager. We actually had a consultant that we worked with, a Gainsight consultant, who was actually one of my former coworkers at Gainsight, who was super helpful and had been through something similar. But you know, just kind of being able to know, taking your previous experience and knowing like, okay, well, I know that we have way too many fields on, you know, this object, and this is not structured in such a way that we really need in this system, and then legacy U, that's not going to work. We have a really good opportunity to just kind of scrap all that, but we should keep this stuff, and you know, aligning that with your stakeholders, which, you know, like internally, like the stakeholders here are kind of my customers, right? Like, so taking that customer facing experience and applying it to internal stakeholders, and making sure that, you know, we're kind of doing what they want and what's in their best interest, and then coming up with a good plan to actually, like, you know, kind of throw out the stuff that's not needed, keep the stuff that is, and merge it all together in one unified instance. It was a, you know, skipping over or glossing over a lot of like the nitty gritty details, but you know, I use like almost every bit of my like experience, both technically and customer facing, to, you know, make that all happen. So yeah.
I know, yeah, I think like just on the data models, right? Like when you talk about like, you know, what fields are being used, what fields are not being used, and you've got, you know, objects everywhere, and you're trying to kind of merge them. I've been through a few experiences similar to that where we've merged technologies, and we had also like account ID issues where just trying to map the accounts all together so
Yeah.
that whatever a company A actually was company A on the other
Yeah.
side as well, and trying to link all that stuff up. So yeah, definitely lots of challenges there, and you could take months just spinning your wheels on trying to figure out what is what is the data model going to look like. What did you get involved as well with, like kind of the other side of Gainsight, like driving Journey Orchestrator and merging that, or the playbooks, and kind of merging effectively, I assume, like the CS strategies that came with those two companies?
Yeah. So we did. It's it just the way it worked out with us. Like it tended to be kind of like we defaulted to one company kind of being the one that kept it. But like there were instances where the other one would kind of supersede. It just depended. But the big example I have for you is like our relationship setup. So like Legacy K did not use relationships at all, even though there's a very obvious use case for them to do so. But they were on Salesforce edition, and it was kind of, the ship had kind of already passed on that. So like they just never decided to do it. And when I first came in, it was like, okay, well, we're not going to, implement relationships. That makes no sense. It's not going to, we're building on Next. So like it's like not even worth the trouble, not even close. So on the other hand, Legacy U was using relationships, but it was at a much more granular level than we thought made sense when we, talked to people and stuff. So that was an example where we kind of, got the relevant stakeholders in the room. We said, hey, look, I think we definitely do need to use relationships. We use, 5 different kind of core solutions here at UKG. That's what we sell. And now that we're going to be combining these two systems together, finally, like it's going to make sense that we show, one of our products is UKG Pro, which is, like the Legacy Ultimate offering. And then, some other stuff we have is like Pro WFM, which is more like time tracking and like HR software that's more on the Legacy K side. It makes sense for us to, kind of manage at that solution level. And here's the reason why. Here's how we're going to be able to use like this new data, object and structure in Salesforce to like kind of populate the relevant fields. And here's the benefits you're going to get from like, as a Gainsight end user and manager, to be able to like drill into this, see, kind of solution level attributes. And eventually we're working on this, but like solution level sentiment and kind of like, going into the future, like what we're going to be able to do, as well as like what we, initially launched with. So that was a good kind of example of how we kind of took the two, blended them together, and said, hey, here's what makes sense, as a unified company going forward.
Yeah, and I have to think that, to your point, there was so much going on, and you made it sound like it was this amazingly successful and easy thing, and yet, there's so much grunt work that goes into it, so much grit, maybe you might say. I'm curious about your solution that you ended up with. I know we talked a lot about solutions today, but this will be a little more theoretical. Curiously, you had one solution that did one thing that was maybe underbuilt, maybe as you described it a little bit, and then another solution that maybe was overbuilt. And curiously, you ended up somewhere in the middle. In other words, you didn't say, well, we're going to just do one or the other. So how did you negotiate that with all of your stakeholders to say, we're not going to do A or B, we're actually going to do C?
Yeah. I think it wasn't as tough of a sell as I was afraid it was going to be, because the team where it was kind of underbuilt, I think they inherently knew that it would behoove them to have more visibility at, some kind of level, right? Like we had, I think, like 6 or 7 different C360 layouts based on like what products a customer had. And it was just a bear to like administer and even, kind of go to as an end user as well. It was just, it wasn't really tenable. And we're just like, hey, it makes way more sense to just have one C360, and then we can have these, you can kind of like do the different permutations at the like solution/relationship level, right? So that was a little bit easier to sell than I thought it would be. The other side, where it was overbuilt, that was a little tougher, because it was like, there's a team that had built that, obviously, but we could pretty clearly point to the usage just not being there, first of all. Like it wasn't being utilized like they had wanted it to be. And once we kind of pointed out, the big thing was, like I said, it was too granular. And I think once we showed that, hey, if we take it up a level or two, you're still able to show these related lists, right, of all the stuff that rolls up to that level. Plus, you get the benefits of, it just kind of makes more sense. You're not having one customer with like 25, 30 different relationships where you're just, it's diminishing returns at that point. You have a customer with like 3 relationships, and then you can see these related lists that roll up to it. So once we kind of like showed it to them, I think we built it out in a sandbox, but we definitely like just showed some mock-up, like rudimentary kind of screenshots, like that showed like, hey, here's how it would look in theory. And that kind of, I think, clicked the light bulb, and then, we were off and running at that point. But sometimes just
interesting that.
Yeah.
Yeah, interesting that in some ways you use the skills our customer success colleagues do, which is like, well, we just asked and saw there wasn't value. And so even if it was built out and fancy and cost us a lot of money, there wasn't value in it, or at least not as much value as we knew there could be. And so we pivoted.
And I would be remiss to not mention that there was a brief time at Gainsight where we were kind of supposed to be like the CSM plus the technical person plus, like, I forget what they called it. There's like 3 different roles combined into one. And we're like, well, you guys should be paying us 3 times as much if we're going to do this. But I digress. But we were kind of expected to be like, I think it was like 2017 that we were expected to kind of be that CSM. And it was like a much longer onboarding thing before they kind of redid it and said, okay, we're going to have these 2, kind of more like traditional model where you hand off right after the services is done. But as difficult as that was at the time, like where I wasn't a trained CSM, but I had to kind of learn that on the fly. I think that has served me well, like, and just seeing other people do it in person and just learning through osmosis that way. But having to actually do that sometimes, I think, Matthew, to your point, has helped a lot, whether I know it or not.
I could see, it definitely would help with like stakeholder management and just being able to, as Matthew said, like trying to show value and be able to explain that value. I'm curious, like in your current structure, like how are you guys organized? Like, do you sit under IT? Are you part of an ops team? Are you part of CS? And like, how does that, like, I assume your main customer is CS, but I would expect that maybe you guys are exposing Gainsight to others in the org. Do you work with other teams as well?
We do, yeah. So we recently got reorganized last summer. So when I was hired in, we were on a team that rolled up to CS. In our terms, that's relationship management, which had a relationship management like operations org, like a traditional, training, all that stuff, and platform and a few others, project management. We reorged into like more of a general services ops org back in July or so. So that's where I sit now. And specifically our pillar is like workforce systems operations. So there's a bunch of like Salesforce people that sit in there. And then our core platform team is on that organization. So we definitely still are heavily involved like with the relationship management team. We still liaise with their stakeholders often, but we also work with renewals and a few other teams that use Gainsight and other teams that are kind of like interested in getting in there as well. So there's a lot of cross-functional work going on.
Very cool.
Spencer, as we wind down, a question, I don't know that we prepared you for this, but I'm going to spring it on you anyway. Give us a prediction. You have been in this field for quite a while. Give us a prediction on what you see in the future of customer success or customer success operations.
Yeah. I hope that this is more of a hopeful prediction, I guess, but I kind of hope that there's just more like kind of serious, investment in customer success operations. I think we've come a long way, but yeah, I mean, I know you two obviously are very involved in like talking to different peers in the industry. I feel like I do that as well, try to keep up. And I feel pretty fortunate here to kind of be in a pretty good situation at UKG personally. But you know, I don't want to obviously name names or anything, but just I've talked to a lot of people that feel like, you know, they're kind of being buried in certain orgs and stuff. And I kind of feel like the momentum, and maybe this is just in line with the economy, is just kind of halted a little bit, or maybe even gone down a little bit with like the value that execs see in customer success operations. I think if you look at the numbers and look at like the impact that we have in general, like we are a pretty important function, you know, in just about any kind of business you can think of. But sometimes, you know, it's not always reflected in different outcomes and budget decisions and things like that. So I would really like to think that, you know, in the next year or two, that's going to turn around and retention is really going to be, you know, a huge buzzword, and everyone's going to have a nice, happy time in CS Ops and Gainsight
From your mouth to our executives' ears,
yes.
Right? Bring on CS Ops.
Yes.
Well, that makes sense. And I think like I've read a lot of RevOps books recently, just catching up on the field. And it's interesting how, like, I think there's a lot of RevOps teams that are forming right now. But at the crux of it, it's all about customer journey mapping and then figuring out how can you drive more retention and more expansion. And so I think, to your point, Spencer, I think there's a bit of a, like, you know, changing of the clothes or something, but in the core, you, like, you know, take everything off and just get back to basics. It's all about driving a great experience and making sure that customers get value and that they keep purchasing and or keep retaining or keep purchasing a little bit more. And so, you know, whether it's called customer success ops or RevOps or whatever, I mean, nowadays it's no more important than to drive retention, net retention. And so hopefully, you know, whatever happens in the world today, hopefully those roles continue and we keep on that mission of really driving net retention. So
Amen.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for being on the show. It's been a pleasure having you and hearing your insights and about your experience. So thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Spencer.
It's a pleasure. Yeah.